Hey guys, in this video, I want to talk to you about edema, which is basically water retention, its causes, and some things you can do naturally to cure or treat it. Okay, so the first thing we should probably understand is what edema actually is. It's typically referred to as water retention, where there is an accumulation of water in the tissue. So that can be in the feet, the hands, or the face being common places where water accumulates. Now, what's really occurring beyond that is actually there's a leakiness in the blood, in the capillaries, where water is actually leaking from your blood into the tissues rather than staying in the blood where it belongs. So now the second thing we should probably understand is what actually causes this occur? What causes the leakage of the blood and the swelling of the tissues with water? Well, depending on the body of knowledge you come from, whether it's a physiological perspective or a TCM perspective, there are a couple of different potential causes, and some of these are overlapping. So I want to talk about some of the major contributing factors to edema. And then from there, since we have learned the cause, or we will learn the cause, we will have incredible insight as to curing it or treating it. Because if we remove these causative factors, we can prevent it altogether or reverse it or start at least a corrective process. So first and foremost, starting off with one of the more obvious ones is actually a loss or deficiency of sodium. So this is the opposite of what conventional medicine might say. Most people from a conventional Western medical background would say that consuming salt or sodium is what causes the water retention, because salt or sodium is going to cause your body to hold on to water. However, with a loss of sodium, there is actually an increased absorption or retention of water. And this is because the loss of sodium actually reduces the osmotic pressure of bodily fluids. Another major way that sodium actually is beneficial for correcting edema or water retention is due to its anti-aldosterone effects. So aldosterone is an adrenal hormone that actually causes the leakiness of the capillaries and the fluid. So in other words, salt and its ability to lower aldosterone will therefore reduce the leakiness of the blood vessels. Not to mention that the loss of sodium will activate or stimulate the androgenic system, stimulating adrenaline. And adrenaline can actually cause a vicious cycle where it increases the liberation of free fatty acids, which will decrease or inhibit energy production or oxidative metabolism, leading to further increased leakiness. So really the whole capillary and blood vessel leakiness is really just a symptom of impaired energy metabolism or the decreased functioning of the metabolic system. But these are some specific ways in which contribute to that. So something as simple as consuming salt is actually a really good way to actually stop the stress response, lower the primary stress hormones, adrenaline and aldosterone, that contribute to increased leakiness that causes the water to leak out of the blood and capillaries into the tissues. So again, something super simple would be to consume more healthy forms of salt. Now, as far as what type of salt and how much is going to vary person to person, and it's very situational or subjective. So first things first, the type of salt is not actually incredibly important. Just pickling salt or table salt, granted that it's not contaminated with, radiation or radioactive iodine or something along those lines, will actually be perfectly fine. You could get it from things like celery. You could also get it from meats, and you could of course consume Celtic salt. Again, looking out for radioactive iodine, but I personally like the Redmond's salt, the real salt. That's one of my personal favorites. Other than that, you want to look at an ideal dosage, probably being a couple of tablespoons in a day. And also keep in mind that, like sugar and cholesterol, your requirements for salt increase under stress. So if you have, let's say, edema, or if you're an athlete or you're experiencing lots of stress, you're probably going to want to increase your intake of salt. Now, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in the details to exactly how much. Just pay attention to your cravings for salt and always satisfy those. And maybe at most, just add in a supplemental quarter teaspoon first thing in the morning and before bed to lower the aldosterone and the adrenaline. But generally speaking, if you're suffering from edema, it's likely that you're not consuming enough salt, and just intentionally consuming more would be incredibly helpful. helpful. Perhaps an even simpler piece of advice would just be to consume as much salt as you want. Basically, don't put a cap on it. I would imagine that you're not going to kill yourself if you just follow your natural craving for salt. That's probably the simplest way to go about it. The second major contributing factor and cause to edema is actually high estrogen levels. You see, estrogen increases your cell's affinity to water, and this can lead to edema. So taking proactive steps to lower your estrogen content and exposure would be incredibly helpful for not just correcting edema, but correcting a wide variety of pathological disorders, everything from hypothyroidism to not just hypertension, but high blood pressure, high cholesterol, amongst many other issues. And we have tons of videos here on the channel as to how to lower estrogen. Definitely be sure to watch this video and this video. But one of my favorite herbs, because of this reason, is actually nettle root. Nettle root in clinical trial lowers estrogen levels to nearly indetectable levels, which is actually really helpful because estrogen is not this required female hormone. It is more or less a stress substance or a stress hormone that has a feedback loop with cortisol. And again, next to increasing cortisol, it increases your cell's affinity to water. It leads to hypoxia by disrupting the use of oxygen, and it's something that you don't really want a lot of. So taking steps to lower estrogen is going to be systemically beneficial, and it can be very therapeutic for correcting edema. So definitely check out those other videos to learn about what are the most estrogenic foods and herbs and substances in your environment and reduce your exposure to those, as well as some other things you can do to increase the destruction or metabolization of any estrogen in your body, basically by taking care of that liver. The liver is responsible for the destruction of estrogen. So herbs for the liver like Chinese bitters will be very helpful. And again, nettle root, which has an anti-aromatase effect that would, in a couple of different mechanisms, lower estrogen. The third thing I'm going to recommend is that you avoid the consumption of polyunsaturated fats, as well as low-carb diets, which tend to increase the amount of free circulating fatty acids in the diet. And this is because adrenaline tends to increase when there's a lack of dietary glucose or carbohydrates or sugars. And this can actually increase the liberation of free fatty acids. In fact, it's adrenaline that liberates fats from the tissues to be used as energy. And this can actually stimulate the production of more aldosterone. And aldosterone, again, is one of the major hormones involved in edema or water retention. So again, you can greatly limit the amount of free circulating fatty acids from your body by first and foremost avoiding the consumption of the polyunsaturated fats, which won't generally metabolize in your body and will cause a cascade of hormones like adrenaline, aldosterone to be secreted, as well as estrogen and others, and this could directly lead to edema. But also I'd recommend avoiding low-carb diets because adrenaline is also going to increase when there's a deficiency of glucose or when the liver glycogen is used up, and this can cause this same pathology to occur. High adrenaline stimulating the liberation of fatty acids, which would stimulate more estrogen and more aldosterone. So to summarize, edema is the leakiness of the capillaries of the blood, which is going to cause water to leak out of the blood into your tissues, leading to puffiness, inflammation, swelling, and disease. This is largely caused by stress, basically, but that stress could be, as we learned earlier, the secretion of hormones like aldosterone. It could be the stress of a salt-free or low-sodium diet, as well as a sugar-free or low-carb diet. It can be directly caused by estrogen, which tends to increase under stress anyways, and a large part of this is caused by the liberation of free fats in the body, stimulating all of these hormones that tend to lead to the increased leakiness of the capillaries in your body. So the things that you're going to want to do is make sure you're not on a low salt or salt-free diet. Make sure you're consuming a healthy amount of salt, following your own cravings or taste for salt. Make sure that you're not on a low carb or sugar-free diet either, and sticking to healthy forms of carbs like raw honey, maple syrup, cane, as well as organic ripe fruits. Take proactive steps to lower the estrogen in your body by watching these videos and supplementing with nettle root, amongst other anti-estrogen herbs. And also be sure to avoid the consumption of these polyunsaturated fats, which will stimulate more aldosterone and lead to edema and inflammation. So there you have it. That's not everything in the world I could talk to you about in regards to edema, but I think it's some of the most important things for you to understand. And most importantly, you have a couple of proactive things you can do to start the corrective process. If you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for future videos just like this. And if you're interested in learning more or supplementing with any herbs I recommended throughout this video, be sure to visit our blog and our online tonic herb shop in the description box below.